In this episode, I am recapping the most downloaded episodes of the podcast in 2023. Welcome to the All About Pregnancy and Birth podcast. I'm Dr. Nicole Calloway Rankins, a board-certified OBGYN who's been in practice for nearly 15 years. I've had the privilege of helping over 1,000 babies into this world, and I'm here to help you be calm, confident, and empowered to have a beautiful pregnancy and birth. Quick note, this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not a substitute for medical advice. Check out the full disclaimer at drnicolerankins.com/disclaimer. Now let's get to it. Hey, real quick, before we get into this episode, my new and improved online birth course, The Birth with Power Pathway, is coming in May. If you want to feel calm, confident, and actually prepared for your hospital birth, this is for you. The best way to be the first to know when it drops, join my email list at drnicolerankins.com/email. Hello there. Welcome to another episode of the podcast. This is episode number 238. Whether this is your first time listening or you've been here before, I'm so glad you're spending some time with me today. So this is a recap episode that I typically do at the end of the year to recap what happened in 2023 with the podcast. And it is crazy when I look at the number of times that the podcast was downloaded overall in 2023. It was downloaded 583,000 times this year. That is so crazy to me. That's over 1,500 times a day. I am so grateful that you find this information that helpful to have over 500,000 downloads alone just in this year. We're well over 2 million downloads total. So I am so grateful for your time and for your ears and attention, and that I can be of service in this way through the information in the podcast. And so today I'm just going to recap the most downloaded episodes over the year. Now, a couple of caveats. I did change podcast host. So the episodes that were published in January and February before I changed over to a new host don't show up because I don't have their individual download numbers from my old host. And there are a couple of podcasts that were published earlier in the year that I think you might really enjoy. Like the one on physiologic birth. That's a term that's used a lot in social media and in those spaces. And in that episode, I really break down what exactly is physiologic birth. So that's episode 190 of the podcast. And then there's also a birth story on postpartum psychosis, where Mariana bravely shares her story of experiencing and being hospitalized with postpartum psychosis. Really moving and informative episode. That's episode 196. So do check those out. And then another caveat is that naturally the older episodes are going to have a leg up on the newer episodes because the older episodes have been out longer. They've had a longer time to get downloaded. So no shade to the most recent episodes because those are great too. But a lot of the episodes come from earlier in the year just because they've had some more time to be out. Now, of course, I think all of the episodes are great, but we're going to talk in this episode, or you're going to learn in this episode, about the top episodes that were downloaded. And what we're going to do, or what I'm going to do, is share the top 5 birth story episodes, the top 4 interview episodes, and then the top 3 solo episodes where I do solo episodes. And if you haven't listened to the podcast before, the podcast is divided up into birth stories. Those are my favorite. Those are y'all's favorite. Like those are always the most highly downloaded episodes in general. And then I also do interview episodes where I interview guests about things. So we'll talk about those top 4 episodes. And then the solo episodes are ones where I talk about a topic and delve into a topic in more detail. And we'll talk about those top 3. So let's go ahead and hop right in. Let's start with those top 5 birth story episodes. And first up, we have episode 205. This was Chelsea's birth story, being informed and advocating for yourself. Now, it is a good thing that Chelsea is a lawyer because she really had to defend herself all throughout her labor and birth. She did a lot of research and she was incredibly prepared for her birth. However, when she asked informed questions, Her doctors were impatient with her and annoyed with her instead of giving her the attention she needed. In fact, after her water broke, the doctor who she saw at the hospital didn't believe her until she saw the ultrasound to prove it. Now, as a Black woman, Chelsea's biggest fear was actually dying in childbirth. And the way her doctors dismissed her concerns is why it's dangerous to be Black in the maternal health care system, and quite frankly, to be anyone in the maternal health care system. However, despite being mistreated and nothing going according to plan, Chelsea has now gone through counseling and she's feeling really proud of her birth. So in this episode, you're going to learn how Chelsea prepared for her birth, how she managed contractions at home, how she labored for quite some time without pain medication, how she felt rushed into her C-section, and then how she ultimately decided that a C-section was the best option for her. Also, why it's really important to think about alternatives to your preferred birth. So you can check out Chelsea's birth story, being informed and advocating for yourself. That's episode 205. drnicolerankins.com/episode 205. Okay. Next, we have episode 202, Charlotte's birth story, choosing to have a miracle baby. Listen, you are definitely going to want a box of Kleenex for this episode. What happened with Charlotte is that her very low risk pregnancy became high risk almost overnight when an irregular ultrasound showed a heart problem for her baby. The very rare condition that her baby had meant that her baby would be born with a partially formed sternum, that's the breastbone, and her heart, the baby's heart, was going to be exposed, like open to air and exposed. So eventually Charlotte had her daughter by C-section, but before that, she had to make a decision about whether she wanted to proceed with the pregnancy at all, knowing that this child was going to have significant medical needs. Termination was an option in her state. This was before the dismantling of Roe versus Wade. And she discussed it with her husband. They talked about it. And for her, it didn't feel right. Now, Charlotte is an ardent supporter of a woman's right to choose. And when it came time to make that decision about the path of her own pregnancy, she chose to continue because that's what she felt was best for her. And that is the right that all women should have, to make the decision to choose what is best for them. And she has some really wise words for anyone going through the unpredictable parts of pregnancy. So I promise you, you're going to learn something by listening to this powerful episode. And let me say, spoiler alert, Charlotte's baby is doing very well these days. Now, we talk about why childbirth education is so important, even for someone like Charlotte, who actually works in maternal and child health. How her care changed after her daughter's heart defect was discovered. What life circumstances for her made it possible for her to feel good about choosing to continuing her pregnancy. We talk about how a therapist and a doula helped Charlotte with her mental wellness, and then why you should make a birth plan even if you are not getting the birth that you want. That is episode 202 of the podcast, Charlotte's birth story, choosing to have a miracle baby. Okay, episode 217 is next. This is Christine's birth story, an unmedicated hospital birth with premature rupture of membranes. Christine had a very positive birth experience. In her words, her pregnancy wasn't easy, but it wasn't hard. It's really important to be reminded and to remember that even though birth is unpredictable, it is definitely possible to have the experience that you want. And Christine hoped for an unmedicated hospital birth, and that is exactly what she got. Now, she knew that a birth plan didn't come with any guarantees, but she also realized that if you don't have one, it makes it very hard to get what you actually want. And multiple people along the way actually asked her what she wanted for her birth. That's great because a lot of folks don't experience that. So she showed up prepared, ready to advocate for herself. She also had a partner who was helpful to help her get the things that she wanted for her birth. So in this episode, you'll hear about her birth experience and why she recommends everyone does pelvic floor physical therapy, why she chose to hire a doula, how she felt that helped in her journey, how she handled her pain without medication, how she very quickly progressed from 5 centimeters to 10 centimeters, why she wishes she had booked an outpatient lactation consultant sooner, and much, much more. That's episode 217, Christine's birth story, an unmedicated hospital birth with premature rupture of membranes. That's drnicolerankins.com/episode 217. Okay, number 4 in the top 5 birth stories is episode 211, Monique's birth story, prioritizing peace. Monique thought she was going to have a vaginal birth, but with an epidural. She knew that very clearly. She wanted an epidural. And she was scheduled to be induced just after 40 weeks. But of course, as it goes with labor, things took a bit of a turn, and you're going to hear about the twists and turns in that episode. Now, Monique is a recent transplant from South America. She recently immigrated to the United States. So she was adjusting to this strange new country of the US when she got pregnant. And going into motherhood away from home meant she really had to be extra prepared. She did a ton of research. She hired doulas. She asked friends for help. And because of all of the work she did to make sure she was supported, she had the beautiful birth that she deserved. So you'll learn about the difference in the birth customs in the U.S. compared to her home country in South America, what resources she used to get very, very prepared for her birth. I will tell you, one of them was the birth preparation course, my childbirth education class. She talked about her preferences ahead of time, was very clear on what she wanted. Also, Monique used doulas very intentionally and strategically to ease stress. You're definitely going to want to hear about that. So this is episode 211, Monique's birth story, prioritizing peace. And that is drnicolerankins.com/episode 211. Let's talk about something most pregnant women aren't getting enough of, omega-3 DHA. The recommendation is over 200 milligrams a day, but less than 5% of pregnant women in the U.S. meet that. That's one of the reasons I love Ritual's Essential Prenatal. It has 350 milligrams of vegan DHA, plus other key nutrients like methylated folate and choline to support baby's neural tube development. As an OBGYN, I appreciate that Ritual goes beyond the basics. The formula is science-backed, third-party tested for heavy metals and microbes, and every ingredient is traceable. And the delayed release design, it's gentle on the stomach, something that really matters, especially if there's trouble with nausea during pregnancy. You deserve to know exactly what you're putting into your body, especially when it comes to prenatal multivitamins. And with Ritual's dedication to traceable science and sourcing, you always will. See for yourself with 25% off your first month at ritual.com/Dr. Nicole. Start Ritual or add Essential Prenatal to your subscription today. That's ritual.com/Dr. Nicole for 25% off your first month. Okay, the number 5 top downloaded birth story is episode 208, Candace's birth story, reclaiming your birth story after obstetric violence. Now, when Candace learned how dangerous it is to be Black and give birth in the U.S., she started looking for solutions. And using her skills as a professional data scientist, she determined that she would be safest opting for an unmedicated birth at a birthing center. At the birthing center, she felt like the staff was patient, respectful, and communicative. However, at 39 weeks, after days of prodromal labor, a hospital transfer was necessary. And that's where her experience took a dark turn, in fact. So in this episode, you'll hear the factors Candace used to determine the importance of outcomes for Black parents, Black women. We talk about what respectful medical care really should look like. We talk about why she decided to switch doctors mid-labor, mid-labor, what convinced her that ultimately it was time for her to have a C-section. And then finally, how she managed the emotional pain and trauma she felt after her birth. This is episode 208, Candace's birth story, reclaiming your birth story after obstetric violence. That's drnicolerankins.com/episode 208. Okay. Next, we're getting into the top 4 interviews, and we're going to start with episode 204. This is preparing for your newborn with pediatrician and CEO of Newborn Prep Academy, Dr. Amika Obidi. So listen, what happens with your newborn in the hospital and at that first doctor's visit after you go home when you take your baby to the hospital? Because as an OBGYN, let me tell you, I don't know. Okay. Once mom and baby are separate, the pediatrician takes over for the baby. Your OBGYN don't know nothing or knows very little about what happens with the baby from the medical doctor perspective. We know from our own perspective as parents, but not from the perspective of a physician caring for a baby. And in this episode, Dr. Obidi fills us in on all of that. He's a board certified pediatrician, so passionate about his work. He's the CEO of Newborn Prep Academy, an online newborn preparation course. There's so much great advice in this episode for how to get the most out of your visits with your baby's doctor. I love his concept of the confident mom's mindset. You're going to love it too. You're also going to learn when you should start looking for a pediatrician, the tests that are done in the hospital for baby and why, some of the most common postnatal tests, any treatments that come up, why you shouldn't panic if your baby loses weight in the first few days, how pediatricians play a role in screening for postpartum depression, and more. This is episode 204, preparing for your newborn with pediatrician and CEO of Newborn Prep Academy, Dr. Amika Obidi. That is drnicolerankins.com/episode 204. Okay, so next up for interviews. Actually, the next 2 are very close, and I'm not surprised. They're both about breastfeeding. The first one is about pumping. This is episode 216, What You Need to Know About Pumping, with Dr. Diana Dixon from Pump with Purpose. When Diana had her first baby, she felt like no one explained anything about pumping, and that's actually fairly common. The hospital staff didn't tell her about options. They didn't tell her about sizing for the pump parts or fit, even how to do it. And the reality is most people will wind up using a breast pump at some point. So really everyone should know this information. Now, Diana's own journey led her to found Pump with Purpose. It's a lactation private practice for people who want to include pumping in their journey, either exclusively pumping or in addition to nursing at the breast. Through Pump with Purpose, she helps the breastfeeding community with common concerns like increasing supply, finding the right pump and flange, and getting onto a pumping schedule. She is incredibly passionate about her work, and it really comes through in the conversation. So we chat about how do you decide what breast pump is right for you? What factors to consider when deciding what size flange to use to pump with? Why you need a pumping bra and what makes it different from a nursing bra? How to increase milk supply? What pumping itself care looks like, and more. Again, a super informative, helpful episode. This is episode 216, What You Need to Know About Pumping, with Dr. Diana Dixon from Pump with Purpose. That is drnicolerankins.com/episode 216. Okay. And the next one, again, that is very close, is episode 213, Breastfeeding Education, with Kelly Kendall, IBCLC of the Balanced Boob. Now, I personally always say that breastfeeding is a labor of love. It is, of course, incredibly rewarding, but it can be incredibly challenging as well. And just because breastfeeding is natural does not mean it is going to come naturally. And that is where education comes in. And of course, firsthand experience is valuable, but you often need someone with expertise and training. And that's what Kelly Kendall has. She is a nurse and she is a IBCLC, which is an international board certified lactation consultant. She's also the founder of the Balanced Boob, an educational resource and support community for breastfeeding families. Now, I have been obviously in maternity care for a long time, and she taught me some new things. So I know that you are going to learn a lot from the episode too. So we chat about what it takes to become an IBCLC. This is important because I always think it's important that you know the training and background of the people who you're getting information from, and we talk about that. We talk about what hand expression is and why that is a really helpful technique to learn. We talk about pain with breastfeeding, latching problems in general, how to handle clogs, how to handle mastitis, how often you should be feeding your newborn. And then we talk about causes, solutions of under and oversupply. Tons of great information. This is episode 213, Breastfeeding Education with Kelly Kendall, IBCLC of the Balanced Boo, drnicolerankins.com/episode 213. Now, the last episode of the interview episodes, the number 4 downloaded interview episode, is episode 210, The Freedom to Choose Your Birthing Position with Dr. Rebecca Decker of Evidence-Based Birth. Now, this is Rebecca's second time on the podcast. She was on the podcast way back in episode 18. And since I first had her on the podcast, my work and her work have both grown tremendously. If you enjoy the All About Pregnancy and Birth podcast, then you will probably also enjoy the Evidence-Based Birth podcast, as well as resources that she provides through her organization that she founded, Evidence-Based Birth. Now, in the conversation in the episode, we talk about birthing positions. And Rebecca comes from a very rigorous background of research, and we really dive into that in this episode. Now, if you don't know, a majority of U.S. births are what are called supine, or the birthing person, the birthing woman, the woman giving birth is laying on her back. That's what we see in TVs. That's what we see in movies, but it's actually not necessarily the most ideal, or most importantly, the only way that you can give birth. There isn't really a perfect or best labor position, but you absolutely should have the freedom and support to move your body and find a position that works best for you. So in this episode, we chat about what are the different birthing positions. We describe them, the research behind the positions, and why you should be giving a choice. That goes without saying that you should be given a choice. We talk about why most people in the U.S. give birth on their backs, and why actually that lithotomy or legs up stirrup position can be dangerous. We talk about birth seats, how medical culture affects birth outcomes. Again, a really great episode. This is number 210, The Freedom to Choose Your Birthing Position with Dr. Rebecca Decker of Evidence-Based Birth, drnicolerankins.com/episode 210. All right, let's finish up with the top 3 solo episodes of 2023. These are the episodes where I'm on the mic by myself. And we're going to start with episode 215, 11 must-know tips to have the best pregnancy, birth, and postpartum experience. This is actually the most downloaded episode of the podcast the entire year. I'm not surprised, because a lot of my social media things, and when you download things from me, it points to this episode. And it's just a really great episode of just things to help you have a great pregnancy, have a great birth, have a great postpartum experience. If you don't know, I've had the privilege of being part of well over 1,000 births. It's probably closer to it is closer to 2,000 at this point. And I have learned that birth is unpredictable. In fact, the only predictable thing about birth is that it is unpredictable. But you can absolutely be ready to ride those waves of unpredictability through pregnancy, birth, and the postpartum period. And in this episode, it's a list of easy tips that everyone can having a baby can benefit from, whether it's your first baby or your last baby, whether you're giving birth in a hospital, a birth center, or even at home, whether you have a midwife or a physician. The advice in this episode is going to be super helpful for you. So I share what making the most of your prenatal care looks like, why a support system is important, how you build one, things to communicate with your birth partner, some ways that you can bond with your baby even before they're born, and then the importance of self-care and understanding why it is not selfish, and then just how to manage the inevitable stress that's going to come with pregnancy, birth, and parenthood. Stress, as we all know, is just an inevitable part of life, and it's how you manage that stress that makes the difference. And you'll learn about how to do that in this episode. That's episode 215, the most downloaded episode of the podcast for 2023. 11 must-know tips to have the best pregnancy, birth, and postpartum experience. That's drnicolerankins.com/episode 215. Okay, next up is episode 212. This is what happens during labor, a sneak peek inside the birth preparation course. Now, the birth preparation course is my signature online childbirth education class that gets you calm, confident, and empowered to have the beautiful birth experience that you deserve. And in this episode of the podcast, you get a sneak peek inside of the birth preparation course, and you'll learn exactly what happens during labor from the moment you get to the hospital until the moment your baby is born. Now, of course, this episode is great in audio. It's even better in video inside of the course because you can see some of the things that I talk about. So you're going to learn like what happens when you arrive at the hospital, like how you might get sent home, how common that is, why it's helpful to have someone with you who can answer your questions for you on your behalf. How you will see your labor nurse much more than your OB doctor during the course of your labor. What it's actually like in the labor rooms. What are vaginal exams? How frequently they need to be done? How position changes can help. Just tons of great information in this episode. This is actually the second most downloaded episode of the podcast this year. And that is, again, episode 212, What Happens During Labor, a sneak peek inside the birth preparation course. That's drnicolerankins.com/episode 212. And if you want to know everything that's inside the birth preparation course and just hop on in, come on and join me there, then head to drnicolerankins.com/enroll. We've had over 2,000 women go through the birth preparation course. And of course, I would love to have you in there too. Okay, the final most downloaded solo episode of the podcast. And I got to tell you, this one was a surprise to me. I just never know what is going to necessarily resonate the most with people. And this one just, I don't know, it was just surprising to me. This was episode 209, the umbilical cord. What is it? What does it do? And what problems can occur? So the umbilical cord is your baby's lifeline. It provides the pathway for the exchange of nutrients, oxygen, and waste. And of course, after the cord is cut, that leaves behind that stump. And that stump, when it falls away, it makes our belly button. And it's a permanent reminder of the physical connection that you have with your baby that we all had with our mothers. And in this episode, you will learn about what are some of the potential issues that can occur with the umbilical cord, including those diagnosed during pregnancy, like marginal cord insertion, velamentous cord insertion, vasoprevia, two-vessel cord, and those that can occur during the course of labor and birth, like umbilical cord compression, umbilical cord prolapse, nuchal cord, when the cord is noted to be wrapped around the baby's neck, cord knots. Now, I do cover a lot of things in this episode. Most of the things are not likely to occur, but they do happen, and it's great for you to know about it. So you're going to learn, like, what are the things that can be diagnosed during routine ultrasound exams, because not everything can. Some of the cord complications, we talk about delayed cord clamping, what the benefits are. You'll learn about umbilical cord blood banking as well. And then I end with a little bit about how different cultures around the world do things to sort of commemorate the umbilical cord and the placenta. So that's episode 209, the umbilical cord, what it is, what does it do, and what problems can occur. That's drnicolerankins.com/episode 209. Okay, so just to recap, the top 5 birth stories were episode 205, Chelsea's birth story, being informed and advocating for yourself. Episode 202, Charlotte's birth story, choosing to have a miracle baby. Episode 217, Christine's birth story, an unmedicated hospital birth with premature rupture of membranes. Episode 211, Monique's birth story, prioritizing peace. And then episode 208, Candace's birth story, reclaiming your birth story after obstetric violence. The top 4 interviews were episode 204, preparing for your newborn with pediatrician and CEO of Newborn Prep Academy, Dr. Amika Obidi. Episode 216, What You Need to Know About Pumping with Dr. Diana Dixon from Pump with Purpose. Episode 213, Breastfeeding Education with Kelly Kendall. IBCLC of the Balanced Boob, Episode 210, The Freedom to Choose Your Birthing Position with Dr. Rebecca Decker of Evidence-Based Birth. And then the top 3 solo episodes were Episode 215, 11 Must-Know Tips to Have the Best Pregnancy, Birth, and Postpartum Experience. Episode 212, What Happens During Labor, a sneak peek inside the birth preparation course. Episode 209, The Umbilical Cord, what it is, what does it do, and what problems can occur. Now, for any episode of the podcast, you can always find it at drnicolerankins.com/episode, all spelled out, and then the number. So drnicolerankins.com/episode 238 for this podcast episode, for instance, or of course, it is available on all the major podcast platforms. And if you want to check out the birth preparation course, because actually quite a few folks who, from the birth stories, use the birth preparation course, that's drnicolerankins.com/enroll. I would love to have you there. So there you have it. Please share this podcast with a friend. Sharing is caring. I'm on a mission to reach and serve as many pregnant folks as possible. That is my heart, soul, and passion, to empower pregnant women. So if you can share this information, then I would so appreciate it. Also, subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening to me right now. Leave an honest review, a 5-star review if you love the podcast, an Apple Podcast, and also come follow me on Instagram. I'm on Instagram with Dr. Nicole Rankins. That's a great place for us to connect outside of the show. Shoot me a DM. Let me know what you think about the episodes. My DMs are wide open. So that's it for this episode. Do come on back next week, and remember that you deserve a beautiful pregnancy and birth.